This is not Hunk. Since RE9 came out, everyone has been debating whether this guy is Hunk or somebody else. And I've made a couple videos talking about the subject on why I don't think it's Hunk, but the short form format makes it so like I can't go into that much detail. So I want to make an entire video just explaining it. Chat, this hits like a very special part of my brain. I want to start off by saying I like Hunk. I'm a Hunk fan. But if Capcom came out and said, yup, this guy is Hunk right here, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But they didn't do that. After 28 years of calling him Hunk, they suddenly decided to call him the Commander. They intentionally created a mystery around it. And I think by coming out and saying, oh, this is Hunk and moving on, you are skipping over the entire mystery they're trying to set up, which I think is going to tie into the DLC. The post-credit scene of the game is the elite guard guys. Let's start with the characterization of Hunk, because it's very important to understand why this guy isn't Hunk. Hunk is not a very deep character. He only makes like a real appearance in 2 games, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4. In Resident Evil 4, he's in the mercenaries mode, so he doesn't have any dialogue. The only time that he gets any real story is in the Resident Evil 2 4th survivor mode. But we actually learn a lot about his character from this mode. And I know if you're like a new Resident Evil fan, you're like, dude, well, like this guy appears in 2 games in the last 28 years. He's such a random side character. This guy's in most people's top 3 Resident Evil characters of all time. He just has aura, okay? He has hella aura, bro. On top of looking cool, there are 2 core personality traits to Hunk. He doesn't play, and he's all about the mission. He's only business. You can see this. He's coming out of the sewer, and this helicopter pilot Nighthawk is talking his ear off, bro. Oh, Mr. Grim Reaper, Mr. Grip Reaper, how you doing? And Hunk is like, shut up, where is my helicopter? By the way, in this 4 survivor mode, Hunk runs a 1v literally every enemy in RE2 and wins. RE characters love to mess around when they're like in a life or death situation, like Leon cracking jokes while he's like backflipping enemies. Hunk does not do that. Hunk is a very realistic character in that he doesn't play in these types of situations. He's trying to do things in the most efficient way possible. He designed a fighting style called CQBZ, you know, the neck snap that he does, the purpose of taking out zombies in the most efficient way possible. Secondly, he does not play about the mission, and he would never do anything to ever jeopardize it. He was sent into Raccoon City a week before the events of RE2 in Operation Nestwrecker to capture William Birkin and the G-Virus. One of his dumbass soldiers, Martinez, shoots Birkin, and he's pissed about this. Hunk is pissed, like, what? That was not our mission. And then, you know, Birkin turns into a monster, the G-Virus escapes into the sewer system, everyone gets sick, whatever. But Hunk, despite his team getting wiped out, he still goes out of his way to get the G-Virus and survive from Birkin long enough for Nighthawk to come and rescue him, so that he still completes the mission of getting the G-Virus sample to Umbrella. That's how dedicated he was. He could have probably left that shit and just left Raccoon City and been fine. Also, Hunk is not someone who has like an ego or sees himself as better than people. So he actually has a really good line in the 4th survivor where basically he's pretty much out of time. The city's about to get nuked and he's not close to the helicopter pickup site. Nighthawk is like, oh, you're out of time, bro. Where are you? And Hunk is like, go, get out. And the helicopter pilot's like, no, dude, I'm not gonna leave you. And Hunk says, this is war. Survival is your responsibility. That isn't something that someone with an ego would say. He sees himself as just like another soldier. He didn't want to risk Nighthawk's life in order to save his. This has been his characterization for the last 28 years. Do you think that the Hunk that I just described to you would call off his men and then proceed to sprint at Leon Kennedy, who is one of the most well-known agents in the entire world, with a hatchet while Leon has a gun, then proceed to let Leon get up when he could have easily shot him? It doesn't make sense. He's openly jeopardizing the mission, which he doesn't do, all for the chance to take out Leon for his own pride. This guy is not treating the situation like in war, survival's his responsibility. This is what tipped me off to like, this cannot be Hunk. I don't think it's Hunk. I think it's a clone of Hunk made by Umbrella. And the reason why I say it's a clone and not just like some other guy pretending to be Hunk is because he does have the exact same voice actor as Hunk in RE2. And he does have the Raccoon City Syndrome hand, which I'll address in a second. But I don't think it's a situation where it's like another guy pretending to be Hunk. I think it's definitely a Hunk clone. Cloning is a major part of RE9. The plot of the game is that the Connections is spamming clones of Grace in order to try to get Elpis. Emily and the girl are both clones of Grace. Chloe, the girl that you play as in the orphanage, is also a clone of Grace. You have a Mr. X clone, and Zeno is obviously a clone of Wesker. There's a lot of cloning. And by the way, cloning is a major thing in all the RE games. RE Village ended with Chris looking at a BSAA clone of himself. RE6, the entire plot happens because of an evil Ada Wong clone. Cloning is a major thing. Speaking of Zeno, I think he's the key to cracking this entire mystery. Zeno clearly has Raccoon City Syndrome. You see, the bruises that he has are similar to the ones that Leon has, and that's because he's infected with the T-Virus. That's the virus that gave Wesker those freaking Neo powers. Raccoon City Syndrome happens when you have a dormant strain of the T-Virus in your body for a long time. It adapts and evades the host's antibody. It has to spend a lot of time in your body in order for it to turn into Raccoon City Syndrome. It seems like it takes a similar amount of time for everyone, one since all of the people start dying back to back to back. And we know it has the ability to infect people with special powers because Sherry has it and she has crazy regeneration due to the G virus. But here's the thing about Zeno. He clearly has white hair and he's like a much older Wesker than the one we see in the game. But that doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Wesker died in 2009 and I don't see Wesker allowing clones of him to just be running around. So Zeno had to be created after Wesker died. 2009 is like 17 years ago. So this Wesker clone at max could only be 17 years old, which would honestly explain why his personality is so different from Wesker. Why this guy is like more of like an entitled child and less of a Machiavellian villain. In order to get him to the age that he looks like in the game, the clone's age has to be sped up. And this is something that's clearly happening in the story too. All the clones of Grace have their age clearly sped up to be like 12 because they make so many of them and then just immediately dispose of them. Emily, the clone that we meet, is subject 171. That means that they probably made like 170 of them before her. Question is, when did Zeno get the T-virus? Was it already inside the cells of the Wesker gene seed he got? Or was he given it later on? I think it's the former. Because the original Wesker lived with the T-virus for like 13 years before he died to Chris and Sheva in the volcano, and he showed nothing of Raccoon City Syndrome. Why would Zeno, with a fresh version of T-virus in his body that has yet to adapt to his body, he's showing late-stage Raccoon City Syndrome after 17 years? Remember, it took Leon 28 years to get to late-stage Raccoon City Syndrome. I think the cloning process is imperfect, and it came with the dormant T-virus. That's why the rapidly aging Zeno has the late-stage version of Raccoon City Syndrome. Obviously, it affects him differently because all of his powers are directly derived from the T-virus. We have confirmation that the cloning process is terrible due to all the failures of the Grace clones. The girl who was a Grace clone just randomly turned into a monster. Emily randomly turns into a monster. They don't have it down to an exact science. And that's what loops us back to the Hunk clone, and specifically the Raccoon City Syndrome hand. It's a bad Hunk clone with a dormant T-virus. That would also explain why he acts so different from the Hunk we know. He doesn't have the same lived experience, not to mention much less time lived in general. I think the hand was added as a red herring to distract the fans from the cloning subplot that's clearly going on. Like, there is so much cloning going on in the story now that I've looked into it, and it's never once like mentioned. And that's why I think this ties into the DLC so much. We're probably going to be addressing the whole clone army that they have. We also know that Umbrella was actively trying to replace Hunk. There's an entire game about it called Umbrella Corps. It's awful. And it's also unfortunately canon with a lot of ties to RE9 actually. Basically in the game, you take part in something called the experiment where you're collecting a bunch of samples. It's just you doing a bunch of shitty versions of Hunk's old missions. The entire game is styled around Hunk. He'll do the same moves as Hunk, including the neck snap, because that's not unique to him. He created the CQBZ fighting style, but he taught other people. And when you fully complete this game, you get the achievement Return of the Grim Reaper. Hunk doesn't actually appear in this game, by the way, which is weird because it's a game about him, but that might be because at the end of Code Veronica, Hunk left Umbrella to be an independent mercenary. This has not been retconned yet, so it's technically canon. That's probably why the entire game exists, because Hunk wouldn't be working for Umbrella anymore, and they need a new one. That also adds to the theory that this is a Hunk clone in RE9, because the original Hunk wouldn't be working for these people anymore. But you know who does make an appearance in this game? A clone of Albert Wesker. The person in charge of the experiment is not directly named to be Wesker, but he is heavily implied to be Wesker because he is voiced by the original voice actor of Albert Wesker. This is Zeno. We know that the Hunk clone was directly reporting to Zeno because he leaves the room with Zeno and Grace to come fight us. Main character from the Umbrella Corps and the Hunk clone both have the same fighting style. Like, the connections are insane to this game. Plus, the guys in Umbrella Corps are a lot more cocky and arrogant when they fight, just like the commander in RE9, and unlike the Hunk we know. You even make the argument that the character that you play as in Umbrella Corps, called 3A7, is the Hunk clone we fight, but there's just no proof that 3A7 is a clone, other than his name being 3A7. At the bare minimum, the commander, whoever he is, was through the Umbrella Corps training, working directly for the Albert Wesker clone. It's just too much, you know what I'm saying? It's just too much pointing to this not being Hunk, and there's clearly much more to this. The commander's body goes missing after your fight. The moment you leave this door, the body despawns, and it's not the game cleaning up or whatever people are saying, because the blood splatters are still all over the walls, and if you go to the room before this, the elite guard soldiers that you killed way earlier are still on the ground. This commander guy is being intentionally left alive, and with the post-credit scene, I think it's all gonna play into some sort of DLC, and it'd be really cool to get a DLC where we actually get to play as Hunk, a la the fourth survivor, because this entire game is a reference to RE2. You know, maybe we play as Hunk taking down the clone army. That would make this game even more of a Metal Gear Solid parallel than it already is. Plus, let's just say everything I've said up to this point is bullshit. horseshit. After 28 years, they started calling him Commander, changed his entire personality and all the... You're expecting me to believe a Hunk who is pushing 70, based off fan age estimations from RE2, plus a Hunk who should be significantly more sick than Leon because he was exposed to T-Virus way earlier than him, is keeping up with Leon physically and outpacing him physically at certain points. I get it. Getting old in Resident Evil doesn't make a difference. Look at Joe Baker. But old and sick, like, come on, guys. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you for making it to the end of my crazy yap sesh. I'm not a Resident Evil YouTuber, and this is gonna be the only Resident Evil video I probably ever make. I just have an opinion about literally everything, and I had to talk about this. Subscribe for more random, in-depth nonsense from me.